Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Welcome. Happy Earth Day. My name is Natalie Frenberg. I'm with the Palm Beach County Office of Resilience. Tonight we're holding a community workshop for the town of Cloud Lake and Glen Ridge to talk about our flooding and sea level rise risk assessment. So in our office, we love to do community outreach for two key reasons. The first one is we want to make sure that we keep the community informed on the projects that we're working on. And second, we want to make sure that we're learning from the experts, the people that live here in the community. And we want to see what your concerns are for flooding, what areas are already flood hotspots, what areas you're concerned about for the future, so that you can take all of that into consideration as we're partnering with your municipalities on this initiative. So I'm going to pass it over to Georgia with Tetra Tech, and she's going to kick off the presentation and the discussion tonight. Thank you so much for coming.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. We really appreciate your attendance tonight. And as Natalie mentioned, we really are looking for input from you. This is your vulnerability assessment or flood risk assessment. And so we're going to be asking you some questions throughout the evening, doing some interactive stuff, maybe on your phone or maybe just passing the microphone around. We really hope that you will engage with us tonight. It's a nice big group, so hopefully you guys won't be shy, and you'll give us some information. Again, my name is Georgia. We'll be talking about the team that's working on the project, talk about the objectives, again, get some information about your local knowledge, and talk about how we will continue to engage with you through this process. And we'll take questions. If at any time during the presentation you don't understand something or have a question, we don't have to wait till the end. We can take questions throughout the presentation. So with us today is Erin Deedy. She has her own firm. She's a planner and attorney, and she really helps us with ensuring that we are preparing a compliant vulnerability assessment. And she'll talk about the requirements that are outlined in the vulnerability assessment. Again, we have S.A. Nelson here. They're helping with the outreach and all the technology here to get this meeting recorded, so the people that didn't attend tonight will be able to view it later. And of course, the folks in the room, you all from Cloud Lake and from Glen Ridge and Palm Beach County. So we really appreciate you all being here and part of this partnership with us. So we're really looking to identify the vulnerabilities associated with flooding, and not just today, but also in the future. So we have several planning horizons that we're looking to. We'll assess the flooding hazards and make sure that the vulnerability assessment is compliant with the state legislation. This will help identify needs of the communities through the future, and identify community partnerships where you all can work together, or we can work with other agencies and entities to help prepare and become more resilient in the future. And the vulnerability assessment is the baseline for being able to apply for implementation grants through the Resilient Florida program. So in order to apply for those grants, you should have a compliant vulnerability assessment. Do you want to, let's see, I think I'll turn it over to you now.
So in 2021, the state of Florida passed some legislation and created a program where they give money to local governments, cities and counties across the state of Florida, coastal, inland communities, just any community really that wants to do some planning about the impacts of what's currently happening in their community related to flooding and what could be happening in the future, because we do know times are changing and the types of rain events that we're seeing are becoming more prolific. We're seeing them more and more. Does anybody remember last year in Fort Lauderdale when the airport was shut down for 3 days after that rainfall event? Yeah, I mean, that's a real example of what happens when we see some of these rainfall events. And that wasn't even in the summertime that rainfall event happened. It was kind of right around now. It was during the drier time of the year. So we're going to be seeing more of those events where our roads are flooding and you can't pick up your kids from school or you can't get to work. And what we want to do is plan for those types of events. And we want to do that planning in partnership with Palm Beach County because they're working with all of the municipalities throughout the county to help kind of prioritize regional actions and things that can be done in partnership between the municipalities and the counties. Because some of the municipalities are smaller and you may not have the funding to be able to do some of these projects. But if it's an area of high risk and great need, you may be able to find a partner with the county and the state to remedy some of those flooding issues. So what we have to do is we have to look at what's happening today. The rainfall, for instance, is going to be the biggest factor. We look at different types of flood risk, but for this community that's a little bit further inland, it's really going to be those rainfall events. And so we have to look at what's happening today. We have to look at what's happening, going to happen in 2050, 2080, and even 2100 we look at further out. Because when you plan for stormwater structures and roads, you plan for a longer time frame. So you want to make sure that if you're going to build a project, it's going to last and it's going to meet those future conditions. We will identify what we call, just to make it easy, we call them flooding hotspots. It's kind of a misnomer because they're not really hot, but they are the places of attention where you're seeing more of those rainfall events. It may be low areas of the road. It may be areas where there aren't storm drains, or maybe around bridges that are over canals. But any of those hot spots that, for instance, in your community, when I come down this road and I hit this intersection and this stop sign during a rain event, it's always flooding, or it didn't used to flood, now I'm seeing it flood more and more. Those types of things we need to know from you, because, we're a bunch of techno geeks up here. We can run models and we can look at what we think is going to happen on the ground and what's happening, but we need to hear from you in case you know that there are certain areas of pockets of flooding within the community, because this program is really about helping communities prepare for those flooding impacts. So this is kind of technical, but the state of Florida requires us to look at certain things, because what was happening is you'd have a community in Orlando looking at different things than a community along the coast was looking at. So the state passed a law and said, when people do what we call these vulnerability assessments, we want to make sure that they're all looking at the same things. So we have to use certain types of elevation data. We have to use certain weather predictions for tidal flooding. And then we have to look at those planning horizons. Everybody has to look at the same thing. Now everybody has to look at what's going to happen in 2050 and 2080. And so we will be doing two things. We will be collecting information about what we call assets. Assets are your roads, your buildings, the things that are important to your community. If there's a school located in the community, or an emergency shelter, or anything that the community deems is really important to be accessible and open and serviceable during a flood event, we need to know that. And we need to make sure that we have identified those community assets within our maps. And then we're going to run some flood models, and we're going to show what happens over time as we see changes in weather patterns and changes in flooding patterns, and how that affects those assets. Are they going to be less successful? Are the roads going to flood more? And then what do we do about it? Those are the things that we're really studying in this vulnerability assessment. So for those communities over on the coast, we have to look at sea level rise, which is like this lower level change over time in the world's oceans as they increase. They have to look at high tide flooding. If anybody's tried to drive downtown in October and notice that the roads are flooded, those are flooded with salt water, because we have periods of the year where we have more tidal flooding. That's usually in the fall. Storm surge is a hurricane event, like wind event, that's pushing the water up on the shore. And then the one that I think is going to end up affecting this community most are those rainfall events, because you've got canals that are close by. Is the rain draining into the canals? Is it draining off the roads? And is it doing what it needs to be doing? And we're going to look also at those events together and what happens when we see those events occurring at the same time. So this is just a quick little snapshot, because we've been working on this study with the county over the last year and a half. And so what this map shows is the areas of green, we see wider levels of flooding. But once you start getting into the yellows and the oranges and the reds, that's where you're seeing higher pockets of flooding. And you generally see it around existing water bodies, around canals or storm ponds or lakes, because there's already water there. So if we're putting more water there, then it makes sense that it would flood more, or the areas right around there. Areas of wetlands, areas where you have a lot of habitat, areas where you don't have a lot of development or infrastructure around to manage that potential water, that's generally where you're going to see more of that flood risk. And so we can pull this back, up at the end also and discuss with you, I know that area floods, that makes sense, or I've never seen that area flood ever. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's the type of feedback that we'd like to get from you, or something like, this is a really important building and this flooding here is bad because that means we can't access that building. That's the type of feedback that we need from you all. So George is going to take back over. We got kind of a little fun thing. If you got your phone, you want to get your phone out. She's going to kind of explain.
We got a couple of questions that we get some answers on the phone.
All right, thanks, Erin. Yes, so you can scan the QR code with your phone. Hopefully that works. Or if you can go to your browser to menti.com and put in the numbers, the 2581-1898, whatever is easy for you. I'll give you a second to do that. But we also have, if you don't have your phone, we also do have a mic. Or yes, we do. We do have a microphone. We can come around and get your responses to our questions. So, so I think folks are getting to the question. We got one more guy back there that's scanning, maybe. All right. So, no surprise, we have one answer so far. And if you look at the bottom right, you can see the number of people that have responded. So we're up to 4 folks so far. These are live results, so that's kind of fun, right? You get to see what everybody's thinking and as they answer. We'll give everybody a couple more minutes to respond. But so what type of flooding have you observed in your community? We're looking at rainfall, sea level rise, storm surge, the high tide flooding or the king tides that we talked about, the compound flooding, they happen all at the same time. And then maybe somebody says we don't really see a lot of flooding around here. But, this community is unique that it's surrounded by those big water management district canals. So that will, of course, provide some level of service to the community. We do know that Palm Beach County or South Florida Water Management District recently completed the flood protection level of service study. And so we'll be looking into that and see what they have to say about this community for that study. So we have 10 folks already responding. That's awesome. I know that means a couple of you in the audience didn't. But that's all right. So we're going to be doing this again. I got 3 questions today, so keep your phones out. So Erin mentioned a couple of times the critical assets, and the assets that we are going to be evaluating are the ones that are outlined in statute. They do talk about transportation assets, which are roads and bridges, critical infrastructure like water and wastewater infrastructure, electrical utilities, things of that nature. The emergency and community facilities are your shelters, your hospitals, and emergency operation centers. And maybe those aren't things that you own or manage, but they're something that's important to the community. And we also look at natural, cultural, and historic resources. So we'll be evaluating those as well. In addition to those that are specifically outlined in the statute, they have this kind of catch-all, regionally significant assets, where we look at what is really important to the community at large with what regional water facilities, emergency operation centers, utilities, hubs and corridors, the Palm Beach International Airport, things of that nature. So we really want you to think about what regionally significant assets might be here in the community. whether it's a hospital or the airport or some other facility that you use often and rely upon. So here's our next question. And this is a type in one. So what assets in your community are most affect you if you are not able to access it? Either due, to a flood or other natural disasters. Yep, shouting out loud is fine too. We'll take all kinds of answers. I think she said roads. And that is really common. Yeah, the grocery stores are important. We do get a lot of communities that are concerned about road flooding because those are often, the lowest areas because the houses are electricity, power, hospitals, a couple times. We got 2 more. We have 8 people responding. We have 2 more. Helps me keep track. And what's the pump house? Is that a stormwater pump station? Yeah. Yes.
Okay, brings down the level, like we get a certain, water to a certain level of trigger line.
Right.
It's water. Oh, okay.
Oh, it's manually controlled.
The 2 towns, the waterways connect the lakes to the 2 towns.
Yes.
And so if we foresee a water event, we try and lower, be proactive in the event that we need to keep water running out. That's what we did.
Okay.
All are nice to the guy with the ball cap on.
He's like, we usually do this stuff. Yeah.
So on the
Yeah.
canal, which is Palm Beach County.
Yeah, and I believe, Les, was it you that sent me the information on all the stormwater infrastructure? We do have a list of your stormwater infrastructure here between the 2 towns and the culverts and the pump station and stuff. So that'll be certainly helpful to us as we move into this project. All right. So where are we with the project? These are the list of our project deliverables. So the first thing that we're doing, which is what's happening right now, is we're collecting all of your data and your information on your assets. So we've started that, and we have, like I said, the stormwater infrastructure. We know the location of your town halls and your roads and things of that nature. So if there are other assets, we certainly want to hear about those. We will then do the flooding exposure analysis. And then we do a sensitivity analysis to find out which assets are actually in the worst, at the highest risk. They could flood easily, either sooner, they're either flooding today or they'll flooding in the near future. And then we'll identify those flooding focus areas or hotspots that Aaron spoke about, and then we'll prepare a report. And throughout this process, we'll be coming back to the communities and hopefully we want interviews and getting some more information about the community.